I gave my puppy to the paperboy. It was the best thing I ever did. My golden retriever had a litter of 14 puppies in 2008. I took off 3 weeks of work so that I could rotate them for feeding on mama's milk. As they grew and became playful, the neighbors started taking notice. My next door neighbor, Beth, kept very strange hours. Every morning, around 4 a.m., I'd let the dogs out to play and use the bathroom. Beth would walk up to the edge of her adjoining yard and ask how the puppies were doing. I'd politely answer and ask how her son Mitch was doing. We'd talk for about 20 minutes and then move on with our day. When the puppies were about 6 weeks old, Beth told me that her son was interested in having one. I stopped her right there and informed her that if Mitch was interested in a puppy, he should talk to me directly. The very next morning, Mitch walked over and asked if he could talk to me for a minute. I invited him to sit on my porch with me. I hoped it would help ease some of his obvious anxiety. He asked me how much I was selling the puppies for. I told him $650 each. I could see his mind working something out by the way his eyes darted back and forth, as he mumbled a few numbers under his breath. He said, "Leon, I would like to buy a puppy and name her Ginger." He told me that he didn't have a single dollar saved, but that he'd find a job, make payments, and be her best friend for life. Obviously, I had concerns. Here was this 13-year-old boy, with no money and little to no sense of responsibility, who thought that raising a dog was a good idea. I did my very best to make sure that each puppy was going to a good home and I wasn't about to sell one of them to some irresponsible kid. In my head, I quickly devised a plan. I told Mitch that he had 4 weeks to save up $400. He had to give it to me in exchange for a 10-week-old puppy of his choice. He could pick the puppy today, but he couldn't have her until he had the $400. After that, he had to continue paying $100 a week until his debt was satisfied. If he defaulted, by even one day, I got Ginger back. He shook my hand to seal the deal. Mitch found a job that same day while I was at work. He started delivering newspapers 7 days a week. He mowed lawns and did whatever he could to make and save a buck. I think it was 3 weeks later that he handed me $650. He was so driven and I was so impressed that Ginger was his. After all, we'd shook on it. I let him know that if there ever came a day when taking care of her wasn't possible, to please give her back to me. I told him to never give her to anyone else. Mitch knew how I treated my dogs and it was an easy commitment for him to make. We shook on that as well. For the next year and a half, Mitch and Ginger were inseparable. He was always walking her and playing with her. He loved her so much. But, as it goes, life can be very cruel sometimes. The day after the new year in 2008, Mitch wasn't out at all with Ginger. I didn't see him the next day either. It was probably January 5th when my doorbell rang. Mitch was just standing there. I answered and immediately knew something was wrong. I thought for sure that Ginger had been hit by a car. He tried to be so stoic, but in his bravest shaking voice, he told me that his mom had died. He'd found her in the kitchen on the 2nd, and immediately called 911. She'd had an aneurysm and had fallen sometime the night before. He asked me if I could take Ginger back because his dad only had a 1-bedroom apartment and there were no pets allowed. I felt my chest tighten and my throat swell. My eyes started blinking really fast, trying to hold back the tears. He handed Ginger's leash to me and slowly walked to his father's car with his head hung very low. I brought Ginger inside and unleashed her. Kneeling down, I made eye contact with Ginger and started crying. The pain was just too much for me to bear. My heart was broken for Mitch and for Ginger. 3 weeks later, Ginger was getting along just fine with her sister, mother and my 2 other dogs. A few days after that, I saw Mitch walking up my driveway. I opened the door, with Ginger, and invited Mitch inside. Mitch told me that he'd talked to his father about moving back to Akron. They had found an apartment a few blocks from where I lived. Mitch asked me if he could pick up Ginger on Fridays after school and drop her back off on Sunday nights. Their apartment was only a few blocks away, so I was confident that if he needed any help, I'd be right there. I agreed to the arrangement, which reminded me of a shared custody agreement between separated parents. My only real concern was that Mitch would outgrow his desire to be with Ginger. Mitch was about 16 by then. I was afraid that with school, driving, working and a girlfriend, he'd start missing the pickup times and just slowly fade from Ginger's life. Friday was the big day. I got Ginger amped up for the 4:30 p.m. pickup. Mitch's father pulled up to the end of my driveway and the passenger door swung open. Ginger tore off down the driveway and greeted Mitch with jumping kisses. Every week, like clockwork, Mitch had Ginger for 3 days. I would see them walking through Akron Park together and playing on the hockey rink sometimes. For more than 7 years, Mitch never left her alone on the weekends. Mitch was the best thing that ever happened to Ginger. But eventually when I had to have Ginger put down, I knew it would be a very hard conversation to have with Mitch. Ginger was old and her hips couldn't handle another surgery. It was a very sad day, but Mitch and I both knew it was time. Ginger lived a full life and was loved every day of it. Flash forward, I was having a cup of tea at the local coffee shop today preparing a painting proposal. I looked up and there Mitch was. Mitch sat down with me and told me that he was graduating college in a few weeks. We laughed and talked about Ginger a lot. I was so shocked at how grown up he was. We ran out of time quickly. I never got to tell him how proud of him I was or how impressed I was that he'd saved his money to buy his first and only dog. I never told anyone that I cried for weeks when Beth died. And until now, I never told anyone that the bravest man I've ever met was a 13-year-old paperboy.